Thank you, everybody, for taking some time out of your day to join us here. I guess from a little bit of as we're going into this, the whole idea of the session that we'll have here today is trying to hit on some of those high points of the trends and things that we're seeing, myself and Jay, in what's happening in reality capture in the world today, in this pandemic crazy world that we're in now. And as such, hoping to be able to cover some of those topics and leave a good chunk of time at the end for that Q&A. So as you've got those questions, just reinforcing what she had said before, what Katana had said, please get them in there, and we'll have a good chunk to answer and to address what concerns or thoughts or questions that you might have at the end. Now, just one extra little bit before we get through, some other introductions of the rest of myself and Jay. Wanted to talk a little bit about just who we are as Imagine It. Hopefully, you've got a general understanding of who Imagine It is because, well, shoot, you're here. So there's a good first step in that direction. But one of the things that I've noticed lately in some different conversations that I've had over the last year, more or less, with different folks, is that they're aware of Imagine It as a company that does kind of Autodesk or Leica related stuff, but they don't really know who we are as a full-on company. I'm not going to turn this into any sort of a giant advertisement about all the wonderful things that we are, and there's a lot of that. But wanted to make sure that there is a chance that you understood that there's a lot that we can do to help out your firm, yourself in particular, with becoming a little more efficient, more effective in the application and use of technology. We've got a significant business that deals with all things Autodesk as far as consulting and training and working with folks and anything related to their Autodesk software. We've got offices all across the US and Canada. And because of that, it also means that we've got a fairly broad bench. If you're looking for somebody that has specific knowledge or understanding of the details of what's going on in the wonderful world of laser scanning, we've got people like Jay here to be able to help out with that. If you were working through something and you just need somebody that can help out a little bit more with Assemble or connecting a Revit model to a cost database for takeoffs and estimates, we've got folks that can help out with that. If you needed to talk to somebody who's a licensed architect, we've got somebody there. If you need to talk to somebody in engineering, we've got somebody there. It's just a wide world that we're in. And the bench that we have allows us to deal with that, let alone help out with any sort of a customization or software development that might be fitting into the mix as well. So it's a whole bunch of things out there. Really what it comes down to is if you've got any sort of a need that deals with the technology in your business, reach out. There's a good chance that we could help you with that, or if we can't do it ourselves, we can help out with finding somebody who can. So with that being said, a little bit about me. So my name, Joe Eichenseer, been with the company, with Imagine It, for a little over 20 years, 21, 22, somewhere in that range. It's to that point where you just aren't tracking it quite as much. Getting to that spot where you add the plus to the end of some of these numbers, it's just where we're at. My role in the company is that I'm the director of our building lifecycle solutions team, which essentially means I get to have the pleasure of working with everybody that has anything to do with buildings, whether it is design, engineering, construction, going through, and we've got a facilities management team that's just dedicated to that owner side of things. That's everybody that I work with and is on my team. I've been everything from a base level trainer inside the organization to the role that I'm in today. I really wish that in my prior life, prior to Imagine It, I had things like reality capture technology or Imagine It's Clarity software, all these other things to help me out, because it just would have made a world of difference. I'm one of those guys. One of the first jobs I ever went on site for was to just capture some existing conditions for a remodel job in it was a car dealer. And we went out and measured everything, and got back to the office and sketched everything out in that time AutoCAD based off of the sketches that myself and the architect I was with did, and nothing matched. And I never got any better. So this is stuff that would have been really, really good to see going forward. So that's a little bit about me. Moving on, Jay, how about you?
Thanks, Joe. Again, as Joe said, my name's Jay Mezer. I'm a solutions consultant here at Imagine It, and I am in the same vein as Joe there, where I get to add the plus to my industry experience. I've been around a long time, not quite as long at Imagine It as Joe, but I've been around for 13 years, I think, maybe 14 years here at Imagine It. I'm a certified instructor for Autodesk products like Civil 3D. I'm a Civil 3D professional, and you know, my role over the past several years anyway has been on the reality capture side of our business. And one of the great things about our business and the people that are here, and Joe mentioned us having a rather deep bench, and I think if you were to pull anybody off of that bench at any given time, you would find they're all kind of in the same boat, in that we all love the technology. We all love being able to figure out the problems that frustrate most people on most days. So we're going to talk about some of that stuff today, and we're going to start right there with some of the challenges.
Yeah, and challenges. Well, I kind of alluded to that already. Some of the challenges might be a little bit more personal than anything else. Nobody out there can solve my problems of not being able to draw a straight line without a computer. Okay, so there's some things in there that no amount of schooling or anything else is going to work through. But there is this next step of, if I don't have to be the one responsible for sketching things out on paper or whatever it might happen to be able to capture some of those existing conditions and roll it through further, well, let's take a look at that. Now, as we're doing those things, maybe it's the pandemic world that we're in right now or whatever else, but I found myself being a bit more uh, looking closer at different technologies that are out there that I might want to take on, being a little bit more cynical about things, trying to make sure that I've got a limited amount of funds to be able to work with, and as such, I want to make sure that I'm spending it very carefully, because we've got vaccines rolling out. We've got things. It feels like things are loosening up a little bit, which is awesome for business and in architecture and building design and construction and all that. But there are places where, if we look at something like the idea of reality capture and laser scanning and point clouds, I know that I'd like to be able to do those things. I've mentioned that, and I know that people on our team, like Jay here, is excited about it. We've talked about it often. But there's a point at which, where do I want to be trying to make that leap to get into this kind of newfangled technology? And as such, what I've got here is a couple of situations that I want to be able to describe and work through with Jay and see how well and what sort of places can we have this type of technology, this reality capture technology, solve some of my problems. Now, as such, I will say that, yeah, sure, I've prepped Jay for some of the questions that I'm going to ask him, but I will guarantee you that through the time that we'll have here, that we're talking and kind of bantering back and forth, I'm going to be asking some things of Jay that I have not prepped him for. And so we're going to get those, legitimate off the cuff types of answers and things that are coming along, let alone any of the questions that you're typing in and getting into the Q&A panel as we're coming along. So try to make this a little bit as an interactive thing of what are the types of things I'm running around into. And basically, Jay, what do you have that can solve my problems?
Well, of course, we're not going to solve all problems, but one of the things I think, you know, technology, at least the way I look at it, is there for us to do is take those everyday big problems that we experience and really make them less obtrusive, and you know make them so that the big problems become at least much smaller problems than they currently are, and make them more manageable. So some of the problems that I see us having are, you know with the pandemic, we run into some of these challenges where we can't get onto a particular site for because of COVID reasons. I think that's kind of a blanketed term there, COVID reasons. Um, but you know, if we are able to get on site, we're making a phone call and they're saying, okay, well, sure, we're going to let you on site. It's going to be on this scheduled day and it's only for this amount of time. So you're very, very much limited, where in the past we were able to kind of make a phone call, somebody let us in and said, okay, you go to town, whenever you're done, let us know, we'll lock back up. Well, like I said, nowadays it's, here you can be on site for 2 hours or maybe 3 hours rather than the whole day that we used to be there um, before, right? So, um, you know, then we were going to take a look at also being able to um, keep individuals safe by physically distancing ourselves and, not spread the COVID virus, right? So the days of us getting on site and having 2 or 3 or 4 people visit that site to collect existing condition data, those days are at least temporarily anyway, paused, right? Maybe we can take one person, and if we're lucky, maybe we can take 2 people. So, we're not just talking about COVID here either. It doesn't have to be, all about the pandemic. Some of the solutions that we have and that we might talk about today, they've been around a while. People didn't look at them maybe in the same way that they did before the pandemic because the need wasn't there as much. But now that need is obviously here, and it's coming more to the forefront. So maybe these solutions aren't going to be just temporary. So one of the other challenges I think we face is that everybody's working for either in a remote office or maybe from their home, which I am now. So even if we collect the data, we do get on site and we collect all that data. How are we going to share the data with our coworkers or maybe other stakeholders, right? If any of you have worked with point cloud data, and I'm going to assume many of you have, since you're here talking about this or listening to it anyway, that the data can be very large, right? So we're not talking about megabytes here. We talk more in the terms of gigabytes when we talk about point cloud data. So how are we going to be able to share with those folks in that other office or in their home? This has always been one of our biggest challenges, but more and more the uh, majority of the workforce is left at home. So with everyone working from home, how do we provide them access to that data? Remote work can be done several different ways. We'll talk about these ways as we go forward. So we'll take a look at some of the current solutions as well as what's coming in the near future.
Okay. So with that as a kind of setting the stage for some different things, I guess one of the issues you mentioned was the idea of site access. So yeah, again, if I go back to my world pre-COVID, pre-Imagine It, like you indicated, I could most of the time wander around the site to my heart's content. That car dealer thing is trudging through some weeds to get some boundaries and fence lines and junk like that, and that's all well and good. Um, but what about how do we deal with some of those things where we don't have access for good periods of time? Because I know that that job that I went out to, we drove out there, probably spent probably a good half a day to get what ended up being, for the most part, just the boundary of the site that we had to work with. We didn't even get the slope of the ground and the terrain to be able to understand what we could do for this renovation project. We were just getting the perimeter of the flats, if you want to call it that. And it took us half a day to get those things. And again, I still got it wrong. We got different places where I know that we've got many of our customers that are going and working in different places where it's a more secure environment, and you may not have access to everything all the time or for longer periods of time. I know that in my past world, it takes a good chunk of time for me to be able to capture all this data. And I had myself and a few other people helping us out with that. How does this reality capture stuff help us with that site access where we don't always have a whole lot of time or to work with it?
Yeah, when you don't have time to collect data, you really have to look at that project much differently, if that's the correct term, um, where you have to say, well, geez, now I have to get only the data I want. And maybe in the example you provided with a car dealership, maybe you're walking around going, okay, well, I'm going to take this wheel and I'm going to measure, and of course that wheel's going to go side to side a little bit and measure the length of the building, and this is really all the time I have. Well, remember that some of the hardware that's out there allows us to go and not only collect data very quickly, but we're collecting a lot of data very quickly. And some of the benefits of this are just simply that we're collecting more data than we actually need sometimes. And that's a good thing in a lot of cases because, well, again, we'll use your car dealership as an example. Maybe that car dealership stays with your company, builds what you're with the building they're going to build, but then later decides, hey, I want to add on. Okay, well, we can take the data that we collected and be able to continue on with that data that was collected the first time we were out there.
Okay. Well, what's that do for speed? It's like I get all that data, but one of the promises that you have for me is that I can get through some of this a little bit faster.
Sure. And let's look at it very simply. The scanner or scanners that we're talking about here are taking millions of measurements in seconds. So if you can run a tape measure and collect millions of measurements in seconds, I'll take you up on that challenge.
No, fair enough. Now, what about the other possibilities, like uh, availability to get to places? Um, so, like there's going to be maybe a hazardous area where I'm not going to put on a hazmat suit, but I might want to be able to try and get to something, through can I do different things of getting like a scanner on top of a, some sort of mobile thing and send it out to the field on remote control?
Of course, yeah, sure. So we're doing things much differently now, right? We're able to collect um, data from farther distances away than we ever could before, or as you put it, in remote control. You can see in the image that we have here that we're able to take scanners, or it's being done where scanners are being placed on top of what is essentially a robotic dog. As I understand it, affectionately named Spot or Fluffy, is
Mhm.
according to the article. But they're placing scanners on top and being able to take these scanners up and down an aisle through a facility where they can then collect the data from the scanner and not have to have an individual person going up and down that aisle. The data being collected is then used for uh, to be able to calculate things like floor flatness. because there are certain companies that run robots along these floors. And of course, if the gap in the floor is shifted just a little bit, as sometimes happens with concrete, right? If it gets to be above a 16th of an inch, anything that has wheels can't go over that bump very well. So we want to find out where those areas are, and if we need to, grind them down or fix them.
Okay. So if we've got access permissions and things like that that can be taken care of, and I'll base part of this off of a question that came in as we're talking through here. You mentioned taking me on for a challenge for time and how fast you might be able to get something through laser scan versus me grabbing my tape measure and heading out.
Sure.
Do you have any either hard or personal experience facts or things that you could throw out there that say, if we take the time that it takes to collect the data, but not just that, because you got to take that data back to the office somewhere and process it, getting that information so we can pull it into Civil 3D, AutoCAD, Revit, whatever. Do we have anything that says what is the difference in time for the end-to-end processing of working with a point cloud versus manual?
Of course, a lot of that is going to depend on what we use for a scanner, right? And how we're collecting that data with the different types of scanners. So if I'm talking about walking around with a handheld scanner, I can walk a very large facility in a pretty quick amount of time. Now, if I'm talking about a terrestrial based scanner where I'm setting it up, running a scan, moving it, setting it up, running a scan, of course, that's going to take a little more time, but my data is going to be a lot better. So it all depends on the scanner that we collect. But, roughly speaking, I can have data processed the same day that I run my scans. And of course, I'm sure people out there saying, no, you can't. But depending on how many scans I take, of course, I can have data processed the same day, exported out of the registration software that Leica has, and then I can have it in Revit or AutoCAD or Navisworks if that's where I want to go. So within a day and a half, I can at least begin the modeling process. That day and a half, you might still be measuring with your tape measure.
Gotcha. I've heard somebody say that it also matters what software you're using to do the processing after you've collected the data. Do you feel that to be true or not so much of an issue
Uh,
these days?
I do, because some softwares aren't using your computer's full capability, right? Um, and we don't have to just talk about Leica here, but Leica does have a software that is taking advantage of as much processing power as I'll allow it to have. So that versus something else where maybe it's just a single core application um, running on one processor, I'm going to be able to take advantage of my computer resources a little bit better.
Okay. So I don't know, I've kind of harped on that enough through here. If we move and talk about something else, you also mentioned physical distancing. So there's certainly some issues there where, yeah, we'll have PPE and all the other wonderful things that we'll need to get work done now. But how is a scanner instead of a tape measure going to help me with physical distancing on site?
Sure. Well, in some cases where getting into, let's say, confined or tight spaces, we might take 3 or 4 people out to, whatever, pop covers or run around outside of, the picture that I'm showing now, outside of this confined space while we have a person down in the hall taking measurements. We might have somebody standing at the top and writing. Whatever the case may be, we're all in pretty close proximity to one another. while we do this. Now, if we switch over and talk about maybe using a laser scanner for this, these devices have something called an IMU built into it, where it recognizes the angles that it's at when you're scanning. So many people are doing this where they're taking their scanner, they're flipping it upside down, and they're lowering it into the hole on a tripod or from a tripod. So when they lower it into the hole, they're just running a scan, and then they lower it a little more and they run a scan. And when it's all said and done, the point cloud comes out straight up. So I only need enough people to help me remove the cover from a hole that I might be going into if that's where I'm going.
Gotcha. And so, is there a spot where, have you seen anything where if you're grabbing one of the handheld scanners or the tripod scanners or whatever else, that you need fewer people on site to do this?
Yeah, I think we can safely say with most of the scanners, we need fewer people because I only need really one person to collect that data. Anybody else that we have on site, of course, more people to get a few more things done can be more efficient, but there is a point where I just don't need all of those people anymore. So we're going from maybe 4 people on site to 1 or 2. I can still get the same amount of work done because really the scanners are doing all the work. I'm just there to make sure that I move that scanner along through the project. We might have a second person just going around and maybe taking some pictures.
Gotcha. Is there much of a difference, do you think, between, well, obviously, for a handheld scanner, it's one person because it's one person holding the scanner in their hand, walking around doing what they got to do. Are you seeing often that people on the, we'll call it, I'm calling it a tripod scanner. I'm sure it's the wrong term, but oh well. But for the tripod style scanners, that it's still also one person, or do you have people still running around and setting up targets and other things to help you out with that?
Sure, and once again, that can certainly depend on the scanner being used in the area, right? Because there are some scanners that still require us to set up targets, or not necessarily require, but it's beneficial if we do set up those targets for a variety of reasons. So carrying some of that equipment, of course, I do it myself when I used to go on the road. When we get back there again, we'll do that as well. But I used to do it myself, but it can be a challenge. So if we are setting up all those targets and all that sort of thing, then sure, we need a couple people. But if we're doing a cloud-to-cloud registration using something like a BLK 360 or an RTC 360, we don't need the targets. So all that data is going together in an iPad, and I can do a lot of that myself. And even while the scans are running, be taking pictures myself.
Okay. So if we take that and say we went through and took all this time to gather a bunch of data, and using whatever device it was, and we've got somebody like Jeff here that went through and grabbed things on a handheld. It's going back to somewhere somehow you mentioned that we're not talking about megabytes, we're talking about gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes of data, whatever size types of things we're going through. So I get it that there's a lot of data that gets things more accurate than what I would have done by hand. That's all great, but like I know that if I'm on site and I take a picture with my cell phone, I can send that to somebody easy, or even with an iPad, I can use all sorts of different apps out there, whether it's just the picture itself, or if I'm using one of those BIM 360 types of apps to share stuff and markup or whatever. That's great, but how do you go about sharing these big chunks of data that ends up being point cloud? Because I mean, I know I've seen some things that are, hundreds of megabytes, and those don't go into email.
Right, right. Of course, you're not going to email all of that stuff. However, there are solutions available where we can take data right from the field and be able to run a scan and tap on that scan and say publish it, and that publisher, it can go to a cloud service where you can have certain people invited to. They can go, they can look at the data right online as soon as it publishes from the field. So you say you're attaching a picture maybe through your cell phone or whatever, which don't get me wrong, it can certainly uh, be of help. However, it's been my experience that sometimes those pictures are taken a little bit out of context. You don't see the whole frame where that where that picture was taken. So you don't see maybe some equipment that's to the left or some equipment to the right.
Gotcha.
Where
Yeah, I
if
think I've
I,
got a picture of something like that on the next slide too, where somebody's holding an iPad showing something, but it's not the full. You're
that's
not
right.
getting all the.
That's right. You're not getting all of it. But in the picture like you see with the iPad, we can take that data and spin it around and be able to look as if we were standing in the space, up, down, depending on where we stand with the iPad, and really see our whole, not only our point cloud, but in a lot of cases, even model data.
Okay, so you're saying that, well, I'm struggling with some things here. So, like when we're working with these big chunks of data, you're saying there's one way we could go by which everybody is you basically upload the data to a cloud resource and everybody's viewing it from the cloud in a mobile app, a web page, a something that's internet accessible. What about the
Right.
things when you need to download and have it running locally on your network? Are there any things we can do there to help with compressing? Zipping files only does so much. Yeah, but yeah, what can we
Sure.
do there to make the files better?
Yeah, taking stuff to your network, it actually is even better than being able to take it to the cloud service, right? Because if I can get it to a local network that some of my or users might be on, um, they can share it through software that's out there that does compression. It essentially acts like a zip file, like you mentioned, where it takes the original data, which might be uh, 20 gigabytes, and breaks it down into something that might be 6 or 8 gigabytes, which of course is a much better um, file size than the 20 gigabytes I mentioned.
Is
So
that the Jetstream product? So the compression into the small thing, or is Jetstream the web viewable thing?
no, that is Jetstream. Jetstream will run on our local network, of course, and we can stream data across our network. I've even taken data and placed it on my home network and been away working in a hotel room and been able to stream that same data across that network, even in a hotel. So it kind of works, to put it very simply, it kind of works like Netflix, where movie files can be very, very large, but you can stream them right across your internet or right to your cell phone. And we can do the
Okay,
same with point cloud data.
gotcha.
Now, if we'll just add to that, if somebody doesn't have Jetstream, there's still a solution for them in that in the Leica world, that's an LGS file. That LGS file works very similarly where it's compressed, but it is a local file on a particular device.
Okay. So I think you had a place where you mentioned or looked at a couple of different file types. It might be a couple slides ahead of where we are right now, and I'm jumping the gun, but oh well. But you had an LGS file, you've got the Jetstream, which does some compression pieces. Yeah, here, TrueView and JSA. What JSA? I honestly, I'll have to say that don't remember hearing anybody talk about a JSA file.
Yeah, a JSA is simply an exported file from Jetstream. So it technically stands for Jetstream Archive file format. And so
That's a
that can be
brilliant,
exported
no, yeah.
and then, I'm sorry?
No, I was going to say that's a brilliant file extension if I had just paid attention to it a little bit.
So yeah, the Jetstream Archive file can be opened in a free viewer um, called Jetstream Viewer. And if we have a little bit of time, maybe I'll show that here at the end.
Okay. Now you also say here there's a future solution for Cyclone Enterprise. What do you mean by that?
It, all I mean by that, it isn't out yet. However, it is on Leica's website. Please go to Leica's website, check it out. There's a video there on what you're going to be able to do with this Cyclone Enterprise solution. And if this works as advertised, boy, it is going to be a game changer for how we share data, and not just picture data, not just across our own network. Share our data from almost anywhere, because it's going to be based on a cloud site that you'll be able to access, as I understand it. Of course, again, it's not out yet, so I don't have it yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, which goes back to, as you mentioned, head to the website and check it out for yourself because that has all the information that we might be able to share about it because that's what's publicly available right now.
Correct.
Okay, so let's assume that I bought off on the idea of we can get all this extra data, and not only do I get my fence line, but I get the slope of the land and all that other sorts of wonderful stuff. Or if I'm interior, I get what I can see inside the building too. If I'm taking this and we're going into that remote work environment, I know that I'm eager to get to a point where we can all be out in the public space together again. But until then, you talked about sharing the data through all these different types of things, but is it realistic to expect that we are streaming either from a web or in a VPN network or whatever else, all of this point cloud data, and let's say we're working with Civil 3D or Revit, we'll just pick on those two for now, that we can have multiple people working from their own home office and working with a point cloud at the same time?
Sure, I think it's completely realistic. I mean, let's just take a look at this presentation we have. I think there's a total of 154 people on one meeting. So the fact that we have a point cloud and we want to be able to stream that through from the cloud, or maybe from our office through a different connection, we can certainly do that. Now, the caveat I think we're all going to be pretty aware of is that, if you're at home working from home, and you're on a go-to meeting or a WebEx or Zoom or whatever, while maybe your kids are playing online video games or they're attending school online, um, and we only have a limited bandwidth within our home, of course, it's not going to be as fast as if we were in the office. But we're talking about a pandemic here, right? And we're talking about things that are not normal and ways we can um, work within the confines of having to work remotely. So yes, I think it's completely realistic, and um, if you're smart about realizing the uh, limitations that your network has from your home, sure, we can take point cloud data across all the network. Now, if I'm able to do a quick demo here, I'll light up my iPad, and I can even share through the WebEx um, my screen on my iPad, and I can do that through an LTE connection.
Gotcha. And by the way, I just have to call you out on this. We are totally on GoToMeeting, not WebEx.
I know we are. I know we are.
You mentioned it. Let's talk. Do that. You mentioned it. If I can. Okay, fine. Do it. Prove it to me.
Okay.
Give me that 5-minute demo.
All right. So I'm gonna bear with me while I switch screens here. All right. So let me know when you can see my iPad screen. It
Sure.
should.
Playing some Jeopardy music.
Give me 1 second.
Talk a little just so that people know that they're
Yeah,
still connected.
it's not connecting through my iPad. It won't let me share my screen here.
Well, that's no fun.
Yeah, no, that is it's not going to let me share my iPad screen through here. I can share a website, a whiteboard, or a file, but I can't share my iPad screen.
See, everybody, I told you I was going to stump him, so I'm not going to stump him, but asking for something that we didn't
What about
prep for.
this? Yeah, nope, not going to let me do it. Well, what I will do then is I'll come back here and show my screen. And
I'm
so,
back in.
okay, great. So one of the things I was going to show was from that website or from my iPad, I can publish data over to a over to the TrueView website. It's in this case, the application I'm going to talk about is TrueView Cloud. And just so you know, all of you are aware, I am actually doing it right now on my iPad, and I'm going to hit the publish button, and it's going to take about 1 minute. So as it's uploading this data, I'm actually going to go on over and explain a little bit what TrueView Cloud is. So TrueView Cloud is like a product. This is my login to it, of course, where I can share 3D imagery data and be able to take measurements. So I'm going to simply just sign into the website here, and we'll close that. We're going to give it just about, I don't know, maybe 15 more seconds. No, maybe I lied a little bit. Maybe it's going to be like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, it is just about done. Okay, so my upload is successful. I'm going to hit refresh here and give me some of my data. Bear with me just 1 second.
Hooray for live demos.
Right? Let me just come back in. All right, and I am, where did it go? Of course, I did this earlier and everything worked just perfectly, and now it's not gonna work. So that's okay. What I'll do is I'll just simply show you that you can come in here and take a look at individual setups online. Right? So I'm able to see this data. I can go from one scan to another, looking at my ceiling data. And of course, this is one of our training rooms here, or in Virginia, I should say. So if I want to, then I can pull this data and take some dimensions. Okay. And I'm not worried about this thing being perfectly straight because I'm getting the overall distance and the distance in my X, Y, and Z.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, again, this is all being run through a browser, so it is not local to my computer. But
Okay.
if we want, we can run from our local computer and we can bring in data. So obviously
Hey,
you
real
can
quick,
see,
it looks like there's some people that are getting problems where the swap between screen sharing has left people with not seeing anything. I'm seeing what you're doing, and it's fantastic. Trust me, everybody. But it does seem like there's certainly a handful of folks that are not seeing what you've got here. It's still stuck back at the waiting to see on your iPad item. So what we might do is certainly as everybody gets back in, if you wanted to check out the recording, you'll be able to see this cool picture that I'm
yeah,
looking at of a scan that he's going through in Jetstream Viewer. But might, instead of what you're doing here, hijack what you were doing and move over to some of the Q&A instead, since we are having
sure,
some video issues.
Also,
sure.
Which I'll
Jay, if you
apologize to
just want
everybody
to
for.
log out of your iPad altogether, it'll probably push everybody back to the presentation.
All right, bear with me 1 second. Let me know if that worked. I just closed GoToWebinar altogether. Yep, I'm out of GoToWebinar altogether.
Yeah, there's a recommendation. Hit F5, F5. But everybody watching can try refreshing as well. It looks like that has helped for some people that are on here. Refresh and can now see the screen if you're coming in through the web.
Great. So do you
Not
want to go through
everybody,
some of the
but some.
questions, or do you want me to show you the kind of
You know what?
rest?
Let's go through the questions. Let's go ahead and
Okay,
do that. I said we were going to leave a
let's
good
do
chunk of time here for questions at the end, and I would like to hold true to my word.
sure.
So I'll say with that, let me just heck through a few here. So one of the questions we had is, how realistic do you think it is that in the next couple of years we'll be able to use cell phones to capture, and maybe the key here in the question is high quality scans?
Yeah, definitely the key part of the question there is high quality, because we can do that right now. On my iPad, there is a scanning app. Now, it is not super accurate, but it will ultimately create a mesh right on my iPad. Now, that's using a camera and what we call photogrammetry. Hopefully that gets even better. I mean, while it's not a laser scanner, heck, I'll take any tool that makes my life a little bit easier, right?
Is there any general piece out there that in general has the relative accuracy of photogrammetry versus laser?
Not that I'm aware of. I find that photogrammetry tends to be within, from most cameras anyway, tends to be roughly within an inch or so. And the laser scanners are able to pick up much tighter data than that. Now, I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, I have a such and such camera that's capable of doing better than that. And I'm sure there is, but one of my experiences are a lot of folks who are getting into the photogrammetry side of things are purchasing more low-level drone type cameras, which are of course aren't as good.
Okay. One of the pieces, maybe I'll take this question. How easy is it to work with the captured data in the specific question here was Revit, but I'll let you answer for Civil 3D, to convert it into actual construction drawings and renderings? I'll say from the Revit side, it all depends on the quality of scan you get back. If you're doing things like you're gathering piping, ductwork, and you need to get to smaller diameters, you need to make sure you're taking a quality piece of equipment on site to have a good quality scan.
Yeah.
And after that, it does take some time because you're still tracking a 2-inch pipe running through some tight spaces and all that. But if you're just doing it regular Revit, you do need to have that high quality scan for getting the major flat surfaces, walls, floors, ceilings, doors, windows, types of things. It works, and you can just use a very quickly to run through a conversion. I guess maybe over to you, Jay, is similar type of investment in time for Civil 3D, or does, well, Leica, for example, have any tools to help out with some of those conversions?
Yeah, and actually, I'll go ahead and take the other side of that, Joe. You know, where yes, in Civil 3D, we might be looking at um, putting data down, but we don't necessarily need the density of scan that you might need for some of the smaller pipes you mentioned. You know, we got to remember that when we do a traditional land survey, you know, we're collecting points that sometimes are, you know, 10, 20 feet apart, maybe 50 feet apart. So if I'm giving you data where your points are 1 inch apart, that's not too bad.
Okay.
So we can create a Civil 3D surface right off of that without the density needed that we would need for something like the pipes you mentioned.
Okay. So one of the questions then that came in is related to what you were just saying there. Scanners are not new technology.
No?
Admittedly, they've been around for decades. It's
Hmm.
maybe new to the buildings world, but it's been around for a long, long time. So if we know that this is kind of decades old technology, and I'm overstating it, but oh well, um, what has changed and improved over the last couple of decades in the laser scanning technology, the accuracy of the points, image locations, data management? What improvements have been made, and maybe if you have anything for what do you expect to be further improved?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, all of what you just mentioned has improved, right? The from all the way down to the quality of the laser through the batteries used to run the scanner. Keep in mind, you know, we say decades old, these laser scanners, and sure they are. But remember, you used to have to run these laser scanners with essentially what amounted to a couple of cases of car batteries. So how much do you want to lug that around? Um,
Yeah.
you know, so now, just like anything in the world that we talk about, right? Whether it's our cell phone or computers or TVs, uh, the materials that these things are being made of is lighter. They're faster. You know, collecting point data at 2 million points per second. Think about that for a moment, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, like you said, I mean, we can go through each one in detail if somebody wants to talk about it at that length, but, you know, everything you mentioned is getting better, faster, just, and not only all the better, faster, but just easier and more user friendly. Basically, if you
Okay.
can use an iPad, we can teach you how to scan.
Okay. So going to user-friendly piece, we do have a question here. There's a couple different versions of it sitting around, but if we've got a point cloud of a building, and let's assume that there's no drywall up because we can see structural members. Is there anything from a software standpoint that would be able to go in and be able to pick apart of a point cloud that represents a beam and be able to tell you, oh, this dimensionally is similar to a W something from a AISC steel catalog, or it's this size of a column or something along those lines? Because I know in the Autodesk side of software in Revit, that capability doesn't exist natively, but is there anything else from anybody else that you know that can help out with some of that, help you automate the conversion or querying?
There's a couple of software packages out there. The one I get to use most and the one I like is CloudWorks for Revit, CloudWorks for AutoCAD. Both of those. Now, the major difference here is one's in Revit and one's in AutoCAD. So if I'm using CloudWorks for Revit, I can create a steel beam using a variety of different steel catalogs. You know, maybe for me, I'm here in New Hampshire, so I might use the US steel catalog where it's going to pick a beam that's close to a United States steel standard and create that beam in Revit. And it is a Revit object when done. Whereas something like CloudWorks for AutoCAD, we can do the same task, but we end up with an AutoCAD 3D object simply because that's the way AutoCAD works. It doesn't differentiate between steel or pipe, at least not without one of the extensions like AutoCAD MEP or something like that.
Sure. There were a couple of questions relating here. If I go backwards for a minute and talking about the photogrammetry from mobile devices, there were a couple people that are just mentioning, and just throw this out there just because there's a bunch of comments on it. For the general public, make sure that if you're doing some of these photogrammetry versus whatever pieces, there seems to be a difference between photogrammetry from older model devices to, like, I know the very latest iPhone, maybe the very latest iPad 2, does have a little laser in it to help out with that, to get things perhaps a little more accurate and convert and work to the mesh. So there's, like with everything else that we're talking about here, the device that you have makes all the difference in the world.
It does.
I guess one last question, and then we'll have to defer the rest of these to be answered separately, because it's a lot of good questions, a lot of good things coming through. Do you have any recommendations for, let's say it's a design or engineering firm, for things that they can look for or try to build into their requirements to ensure that if they're outsourcing the scanning, that they get a quality product coming back to them, whether it's the point cloud itself, or if the outsourced agency is going to be doing some conversion to Civil 3D, Revit, whatever, for them as part of that overall service?
Yeah, I do. The first thing I would tell you is, as far as a recommendation goes on some of these services, do your homework. Just like if you were having a contractor come into your home to work on the plumbing, the guy who just decided to pick it up on his own and learn it is probably not the guy you want messing around with the pipes or the electricity in your home. So same thing goes with some of the laser scanning. And, the other thing is just be very specific on what you're looking for. If somebody's out there scanning, no matter how much experience they have, if they don't realize you're trying to create the piping where you need the detail, they may not take scans at a density. So tell them what you're trying to do with it at the end. Explain whether it needs to be attached to a coordinate system. A lot of times we have a model, or maybe in Civil 3D, we're looking to build a surface and a road, and we want that to go to the same state plane coordinate system. Well, if they don't know that, it's coming in at 0, 0, 0. So these are definitely things you want to talk to people about, and you want to explain exactly what you want to do with this so that person knows what to give you.
Gotcha.
I hope that
And
answers the
I'd say
question.
with any of that, for those deeper conversations, I'd say reach out to us. Let us know where we can maybe just have that deeper conversation, get into some of those particulars for you in your specific situation. Our purpose here as Imagine It is to do what we can to make you that much more successful in your business. And if that's a conversation that talks about what you need to do to be able to communicate effectively with those service providers, let us know. If it's a place where you just need to test and see if laser scanning could work for your style of project, would it work appropriately for this historical renovation project that you've got going on, or that other thing, or whatever, I'd say please do reach out to us. Let us know. Reach out to Imagine, the same folks that you talk to on a regular basis that you might have heard about this webcast from, and let us know where we can help you. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much, everybody, for your time. The webcast will be recorded and provided and made available, and we'll look to address the remaining questions that we did not have time to get to here. And I appreciate all of your time, effort, and attention today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.